It is. It's a different version.
I didn't even know this existed.
Right. Yeah.
I thought the only song that Paper Lace recorded was The Night Chicago Died, and then they're like, let's call it quits. We already hit perfection.
No, Paper Lace had a sec. Anyway, hi, Green Mountain Mornings. Steve West here, sitting for Olga Peters. Wendy Levy is my guest from the Commons. Commonsnews.org is the website if you want to be smart enough to check that out. But yeah, we're talking some wonky 70s hits. And
AM rock.
Yeah, AM rock. I grew up on it. I cut my teeth. I was telling, I don't know if I was on, when I do radio, I don't know what's on the air, we're just talking in my life. But when I was a kid, my dad's company had a safety poster contest. Ooh. So the children of these employees I won second prize, and I won an AM FM radio. I was talking about this on the air.
Oh, lucky you.
But at the time, it's like 1972. Yeah. It was probably 3.
Oh, no, I wasn't born.
I know.
I was -2.
You're just a kid. But I won an AM FM radio. I was like, well, why would I want FM radio? That's crazy. Because I was all about the and I got to say, I was growing up, and when I grew up, this is when we just moved from Maryland to Connecticut. We say going Connecticut. But I absolutely adored radio, and I've been a radio head ever since. But also, I have to say, and again, not to racialize it, but in the very white suburb that I lived in, very small farm town that I lived in, that was how I got a hold of Stevie, and that's how I got the Spinners, the OJs, and all that stuff.
That's a lot of kids' story.
Yeah, loved it. Changed me. I still retreat to it like it's still my favorite, comfort food when it comes.
Well, if you were at my house right now, you would see my collection of 45 RPM records with the same thing. Yep.
Brilliant. Yeah. So I still, and as we were saying off the air, there are elements of it that are horrifying, but I still kind of like it because I have certain attachments to it. So
it's true. It's true. There, there's a term that someone who I interviewed for the paper a couple of years ago came up with. I don't know if he came up with it, but I'm stealing it from him. Disaster pop. The 70s were all about disaster pop. Think about all those songs.
The Night Chicago Died,
well, even Billy Don't Be a Hero,
right. There's that, yeah. Well, and Dead Man's Curve and the 60s and those sorts of things. There's a lot of death rock, so,
death rock.
So be it.
Which doesn't sound like not death metal, death rock.
Yeah.
Or death pop.
Right, yeah. So, Jan and Dean and all that stuff. So, let's just talk about that.
Yeah.
Shall we?
No. Totally.
So Wendy is here to talk about the Commons, and there's tons going on. I was saying that we have in this town often, whether it's cultural activities, news, etc., an embarrassment of riches.
This weekend and in the next couple weekends, it seems like everything is happening.
I know that
could ever happen.
And you can't possibly go to everything.
You can't be in 12 places at once. So good job, everybody.
Hooray, our town. Hooray, our town. And as I often say too, is it's not always an easy place to live, and everywhere you are, or anywhere you live, there's stuff.
There's always stuff.
But I continually come back to the great fortune of having. I'll be here 20 years next February.
Wow.
And that's the longest by double I've lived anywhere. So,
I've moved away a few times, but I keep coming back.
Go figure.
And I don't. Yeah, I know, right? Shocking.
Yeah.
And I don't have any plans to leave. I have a pretty good setup right now.
Yeah.
I like it here.
Well, let's talk. I do want to talk about the articles in the Commons, but I wouldn't mind giving you an opportunity to sort of riff on the value of independent media and on the wonderful job that our weekly paper does.
Yeah, I love my job. If I got a writing gig, a reporting gig at a for-profit paper, my job would be very different, and it probably wouldn't be the way I want it. I mean, who knows? There may be outlets out there that do things in a way that would be consistent with my values, but the fact that, our editorial decisions are made with a big firewall between that and advertising, the fact that it's a weekly also is really helpful for me because I can do more long form stories. I don't have that pressure.
Yeah.
I think the depth that I'm able to go in, and also the respect that I have that has nothing to do, that came before me. I'm still kind of a new reporter, but even in my first couple months of showing up somewhere, when people learned that I was from the Commons, whereas some reporters find a door slammed in their face, I found a welcome mat laid out for me.
That's awesome.
And people want to give me things here, have a pie. I covered the Dummerston. So the Dummerston Pie Fest, which happened last Sunday,
right.
When they make the pie, they make about 1,500 of them. I went and covered the whole pie making process. which was really fun. And they sent me home with a pie. And now, mind you, it's not pay for play.
Right.
That doesn't mean that.
Write good things about us, will you?
Yeah, be like,
here's some ice cream.
This pie's terrible. No, the pie was really excellent, but it's nice to be treated that way.
And that's quintessentially Vermont, and that's quintessentially Dummerston. And I saw a picture of my buddy John Wilcox and others there. And John's just the sweetest guy. And,
he's the guy who fills the pies.
Yes, he does. Yeah. So he's a skilled man that way. We got to take a news break, but the one thing I will say too is, and I used to say this when I used to have with regularity someone from the Commons, Jeff or Randy, or but also from the Reformer. I'm a big fan of our daily newspaper.
It's great to have a daily.
Yes, and
it's crucial.
And these are two different animals. I think the ability for the Commons to go deep down into things and spend a week incubating a story is a wonderful advantage. And so I think our town is well attended to in that regard.
Absolutely. It's sort of like the difference between getting like the New York Times and then the New York Times Magazine.
Yeah,
we're closer
that's
to
a
the
good
magazine,
way of looking at it. I can totally
and you
see
still
that.
need the New York Times or whatever daily paper you read, and the Reformer. I mean, they're able to do that and get the news out the next day. Whereas with the Commons, you might have to wait a week. So I'm glad we have a daily. We need you, Reformer.
Agreed. And it's nice to see that both Bob Audette and Jeff Potter, as editors, are collegial and cooperative with one another.
I agree.
It matters in a town like this. Wendy Levy is my guest from the Commons. We'll take a break. BCTV in the house. Shout out to BCTV and Core and all the good folks over there.
They helped me do my job.
Yeah, talk about another real gem.
Oh, absolutely.
In Brattleboro.
If they didn't cover select board meetings, I couldn't cover select board meetings.
Fair enough. Back in a little bit. Here comes the news. It's Green Mountain Mornings. And we're back. It's Green Mountain Mornings. Steve West sitting in for Olga Peters. She'll return on Tuesday. She's off and about at a writer's retreat. Isn't that a treat?
Oh, good for her.
Yeah, I know. Any chance you get, that's all the more power to her.
Yeah.
A former colleague of yours as well. So,
I love Olga. I miss sitting across the room from her, but I'm glad that she has, taken her show elsewhere.
Yes,
gone up
indeed.
and done more great things.
Right. And she's a brilliant woman in many ways.
Absolutely.
And you're listening to the voice of Wendy Levy here from the Commons. Commonsnews.org is the website if you want to check it out. As well, you should.
You should.
You can download the PDF. You can do all kinds of things, etc. So listen, when I got here Wednesday was the day after Stanley Lind had passed. And for those who don't know, Stanley of Lind Motorsports down in Flat Street, a perennial figure, a larger-than-life personality.
Absolutely.
And I would argue without exception, anyone who's met him would say, is a straight-up kind and funny and likable human being. You had the pleasure of interviewing him over the summer. Talk about that.
I did, yeah. So that was the first time that I had met Stanley. I mean, I'd seen him around, friends of friends, wave, hello, some things like that. But he appeared at a select board meeting earlier this year to say, my shop keeps getting flooded. I just want to let you know. And, he was a real gentleman about it. But he's like, it's time to take a look at this. Yeah. So I cover the Brattleboro Select Board meetings now with the help of BCTV because then I don't have to sit through a 4-hour meeting. I can skip ahead to all the parts that I need to see. Right. So thank you to BCTV as usual.
Yeah. Quick thanks to Nolan for hanging out with us.
Right? Hello. So I said, oh, that's an interesting story, because here's one of those places where a private business is being affected by something that maybe the Department of Public Works can do something about. So what's going on here? Mm-hmm. So I interviewed Steve Barrett, the director of the Department of Public Works in Brattleboro, and that was great. That was the first time I'd ever talked to Steve. Oh, yeah. Steve always gives me all the information I need. And
guy knows this town.
He really does. It's incredible. Here's a side note. I got a tour of the drinking water treatment plant a couple weeks ago with Steve Barrett. That was awesome. Cool. Totally cool. I'm very lucky. Anyway, so I interviewed Steve Barrett, and then I went down and talked to Stanley and said, hey, I think this is a story worth telling. Would you be willing to sit and talk with me? Oh, yeah, of course. Oh, thank you so much.
Swell.
So I showed up on a Friday, and he said, that was, it's a good time to come down around 3:00. So I came down, and, sometimes I'm a little hesitant as a reporter because someone is trying to work. Yeah. It's their business. Well, he brought out a chair, and we sat out front, and we're talking. And I don't know if he planned to have a party or if this is how it is every day, but all these people kept showing up. And of course, he told every single one of them, oh, yeah, this is Wendy. She's here from Rolling Stone magazine. I'm like, and of course, I'm going to play along.
Naturally.
Yes. So my improv skills. And it was really fun talking to him. And then the next time I stopped by, which was a couple weeks later, because I wanted to bring him some copies of the paper because the story ended up making the front page. And so I brought it down, and there actually was a party happening. That was when they had they close off the little block there.
Yeah,
I guess they do that every year. And
he started that a handful of years ago, post-flooding, post-Irene, I think that began.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so there was a school bus, a small school bus that had been turned into an art gallery. And I guess he had met them at some place and was like,
"Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, come and be part of my party." And so the second time I met Stanley Lined, he hugged me and then hugged me again.
Oh.
And there it was.
Yeah.
And so when I learned about the accident, I was actually away for a couple of days when it happened. I was really worried, because I've known other folks who've been in motorcycle accidents.
Me as well, yeah.
Yeah, and if you come out the other side of it, you're usually pretty worse for the wear.
Yeah.
And so I learned early Tuesday morning that Stanley had passed away. Or was it? Yeah, it was Tuesday,
Yeah, I believe it was Tuesday morning.
Tuesday. Yeah, and so I had a couple things, different interviews to do, and when I got into the newsroom in the afternoon, Randy Holhut, who's my editor, decided I should go down to the shop because I knew some folks were gathering.
Yeah.
And so that was a little awkward. I still consider myself a new reporter. I've been at it for 3 or 4 years. I started it as freelance, and I've never had to go and talk to people about somebody they love who just died.
Yeah.
And that was really hard. But I don't want to make this story about me. I think what this is really about is how much one person really meant to a lot of different people. I mean, when I sat with him that first Friday, there were 2 motorcycle riders who were traveling who knew that they should just stop at Lined Motorsports. Like they had come from like California or something. And they're like, we were told we should stop here. There were like local teenagers riding their bicycles who needed to have their tires checked. And so they did that. I mean, all kinds of people showed up. And I think that's what a community person will do. It's not just about their little group. It's about everybody.
Well, yeah, and you hit it on the head. And again, as we talk about a community independent newspaper and the value that you folks bring, you tie a thread through the many disparate factions. That's not the word I want, but there are different corners and quadrants and populations within our town, within our county, and God knows the Commons covers the entirety of Windham County and then some. But to be able to hold the same sort of space to say, hey, let's have conversation from all walks of life. And Stanley's place was clearly that kind of place.
It really was.
And I see, I think it's a pretty apt parallel, tell you the truth. I think the Commons holds that same personality, so to speak, where people can feel, as you said earlier, able to talk about whatever needs talking about, from the arts to like important and difficult issues. And we've been, I've been reading stories. I'm formerly board member at Groundworks Collaborative and been very interested in the panhandling conversation and how we're having that conversation.
Yeah, and I haven't reported on that yet. I'm still holding off because I don't like a lot of what's being said.
Me as well.
But
it's also part of the process. We're airing it out, and
And I don't have to like it to write about it. Yes. That's not a qualification. But I'm still waiting. There's something I'm still waiting for, and I have editorial support there.
Yes.
To start writing about it, and I'm not quite there yet. The same with the thing that's happening behind Lester Dunkley's shop, what folks call the wall.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to write about it yet. There's something I'm waiting for, and that intuition has served me well in the past. There's other stories where I'm like, no, I'm still waiting for something. Like, let's let everybody spin their wheels. Let's let these 4-hour select board meetings happen. People need to have their say. This is democracy. Yes. This is how it happens.
Yes. Agreed.
Yeah, I'm not quite ready to write about it. But with the Stanley thing, honestly, I'm not ready to write about Stanley dying either, but I have to.
Well, I must say, and Facebook and other mediums, I've seen some most eloquent statements made.
Absolutely.
And to his credit, Josh Steele, the other motorcycle business in town, has been, really supportive and really forthcoming and a true friend to Stanley and his wife.
And I really need to give a shout out to Josh, because when I showed up at Stanley's shop on Tuesday to talk to some folks about what Stanley meant to them and just find out, about if funeral arrangements have been made, just to kind of get a sense of how people are managing their grief and how they're coming together, as people will do. I'm an outsider, even though I had been down there, and the especially the big biker dudes were really friendly to me.
Yeah.
But that's not my family, and I'm an outsider showing up saying, hey, like, let's talk during this really terrible time. That's some finesse. But when I showed up there, Josh Steele was there, and he was my ambassador. Even through his grief, he introduced me to Stanley's brother, to some of the some of the fellows who worked at the shop, and I'm really glad that I went. It was nice to talk to people and nice to get more of a sense of what Stanley meant to them. And then at 3:00, one of the biggest, burliest biker dudes, a guy named Crude, that's his name, walked around with two boxes of ice cream sandwiches and said, "It's 3:00. It's time for ice cream." Stanley ate ice cream every day at 3:00 and passed around these sandwiches, passed them out to people just walking down Flat Street. You'd go up to them, "Hey,
Beautiful.
have some ice cream."
As it should be.
Yeah.
We're going to run out of time quickly, but I'm glad. Thank you for that, because I think the town is still, and some people didn't know Stanley. Many people did. Clearly, he's there quite some time.
We're telling the story for the people who didn't get to know Stanley, because he's somebody who was worth knowing.
Surely. I also want to focus in a little bit of time that we have this story that you reported on in youth services in James Arana.
Oh, my gosh.
Give a little frame of that.
Yeah. So James does the court. He's part of the court diversion program there.
Yes.
So it's a restorative justice model. That's where it's coming from. But when, as he put it, when folks are dancing with the law and they don't want to be, he helps them kind of try to put their lives back together in, I would say a really humanistic way. One of the things that he said in the article is that when he meets with a new client, somebody who's been, who's awaiting their court date, maybe they've been arraigned, et cetera, he doesn't look at their file prior to their first meeting.
Interesting.
He starts with, so tell me about yourself. So here's a person who's helping people who are having a hard time and who are, under the lens of the law. He's helping to give them another chance. Yeah. And sometimes it's just by listening to them. And in the interview that I had with him, we talked a lot about gender expectations. Okay. Because most of the people who he's seeing, I think he said something like 90% of them are white males.
Yeah, that was my hunch. It was going to be that disproportionate.
And who've had, sometimes often have had terrible things happen to them when they're children. And because of the pressures of masculinity, they're not allowed to talk about it. Yeah. And so that, they're a pressure cooker. Yeah. And when it blows, they find themselves, as he said, dancing with the law. Yeah. And his training is really fascinating. He grew up in the South Bronx in like the Hunts Point area, which, in the 70s, which is a tough place to grow up.
Sure, yeah.
But he had some training from a community leader who came in to set up like a mental health center, who taught the young people there how to take care of each other. They set up kind of these like surrogate families where the older children, like the older teens, would be like the grandparents. And then parents, aunts and uncles, and then kids. And as you got older, you kind of moved up, and they learned how to be in a community with one another. Nice. And he took it from there. He said he's been doing this work since he was 14 years old.
I'm glad he's here.
I am too. He was an incredible person to interview, and I feel really privileged that I get to go and talk to people.
Well, it's like, the Commons, reformers we talked about, BCTV certainly has its options as well, and radio here. There's no shortage of interesting and profoundly effective people in our community. So
I wish that I had more I wish there were 3 of me to interview all the people and cover all the stories that I could, but as it is, you should see all the assignments I have. So.
I know, and you do what you can on the budget you have and with the number of people you have, and I still think the Commons is one of the most impressive publications, considering how I know you guys and how hard you work.
You've been into our newsroom.
I've seen it. I know how it works over there. So
yeah.
Wendy Levy works for The Comment. She's a reporter and also a friendly and likable person. Thank you for being on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Thanks for being had. I love that joke. Hey, what? Steve West in for Olga Peters. We'll come back in a minute and wrap up.